In this work along, I want to show you the Dotty Pressure brush set. To do this, well, I've used this image before on the watercolor masterclass, but I think it's a good subject for this particular brush set because with anything stippling or pointillism, you've got two choices. You can do it the way Sura used to do it and make massive canvases with lots of little tiny dots, and then you look at a distance and all the colors fuse together and it's really quite remarkable. But the problem with that is we simply don't have an iPad with a screen big enough to come anywhere near the size of that style of painting. And so you could come to, say, the medium scatter gradations, and you can make your dots very small. Let's up the opacity. In fact, let's make it a very light color so you can see this. Yeah, you can do it that small, but there comes a certain point it looks a little bit like a gritty airbrush. That is fine if that's the effect you want. But the other way of doing it is to use larger dots, and it makes it very obvious to the viewer that you've used larger dots. That's the approach I want to take with this. Right, now what I am going to do is I'm going to come to my swatches layer, which I haven't locked yet. Let's zoom up close and personal with it. I will choose from my general tab my DC hard blocker because I want to use a little bit of the color theory that comes with Procreate. So look, forget about the white swatch. I'm going to come to the next one down, and then I'm going to open up my colors panel, and I'm going to come to the one I'm circling now, the harmony panel. What I'm going to do is come to this word I hate saying because I know I'm getting it wrong, analogous. And when I do that, you can see the color I have currently selected is the middle of the two, and the circle is slightly larger. But what I am going to do is come to the one just to the left of it, and I'm going to put that down here. Then I'm going to come back. It's still got the same three colors. I'm going to come to the one on the right. I'm going to put that there. Then I'm going to repeat this all the way down. And I think I might have discovered a bit of a glitch. Close it up again. There's the color I chose. This is the next color I want. But when I come here, it somehow seems stuck on the previous color. I'm wondering if I close up and I actually draw something with this, and then I come back, well, look at that. It looks like I've discovered a glitch. Wonderful. So what I'll do is I'll come to the one I was using. Yeah, look at that. This is giving me some rather strange results because I was doing this color which I'm drawing over thinking that's a little bit of an acidic color compared to this color. Oh yeah, now it seems to have corrected itself. So let's try that. I wonder if that will happen again. Let's try this one down here. Come back up. Yeah. This is the thing that should have two colors either side. Now I could try fudging it by moving it around like that and putting something in there, which actually is quite nice. But I don't want you to watch me struggling to make some glitchy software work. Look, I will come here and no, you know what? 2-finger tapping until I've got everything out of the way, and we'll do this another way. Come up to our swatches layer, swipe to the left and duplicate, then come up to our transform, and I'm going to move this one to the left. Then with my new layer, I'm going to come to hue, saturation, brightness. I'm going to come to the hue slider and I'm going to move that to the right just slightly. And this is giving me the kind of effect that I wanted. I've got a hue shift. Those yellows have moved more towards green. So great, this is giving me the same thing. So let's come down to our original swatches again, duplicate my layer, then come to my transform and move that to the right, and then come to my adjustments layer again, and this time I will move towards the left, which is giving me warmer colors. Those warmer colors are looking a little bit too saturated for my liking, so I'm going to reduce the saturation and maybe move it around a little bit more. No, back a little bit. There. And by doing this, by shifting the hue, what I want to do is put down the middle column of colors. But also a very common thing with pointillism is, well, you put down your main color, but then you put down colors which are close to that color. And in this case, I'm going for warmer colors and cooler colors. or more reddish and more greenish. And in that way, you get the different colours all blending together and your eye starts to fuse them together, like the Seurat paintings. I will come to my swatches, tap on the icon, and I'm going to merge down, then I am going to merge down again. I'll do what I normally do, tap, and then come to alpha lock, so I can only affect this layer where there are already pixels. Then I will come back to my adjustments and I will come to Gaussian or Gaussian or Gaussian or whatever way you want to say it, jeune bleu. Put my finger at the top and move to the right and dragging so that I get my main colours, but I'm getting a little bit of a gradient in between my main colours. This gives me the best of both worlds, because if, say, I want to choose that colour there, I'm good. If I want to choose that colour there, I'm good. And I can see where my principal hues are. But if I decide I want to be really fussy about it, then I can come here, and if I want a colour which is somewhere in between that colour and that colour, I now have a whole lot of colours that are somewhere in between that colour and that colour, thanks to that blur. I've got my reference picture. If you check the name of the file, you will see the original author. It's from Unsplash, full credit where credit is due. And let's come to our draw here layer. Actually, no, let's come back to our swatches. I'll take alpha lock off because I don't need it, but what I will do is I will swipe to the left and I will lock it so I don't end up drawing on that layer by accident. Come down to our draw here layer. Then let's come down to our Dotty pressure brushes. Now let's take, say, the dense scatter, and let's choose a light color like this. My opacity is set to 100%. My size, for this, I think I'm going to be using a size of 45 and a size of 20. I'm going to start off with a size 20. These are smaller dots. And if I press very lightly, you get almost nothing. If I start to press a bit harder and very hard, and then gradually ease the pressure off. This is why this brush set is called Dotty pressure, because the softer you press, the more transparent it is, the harder you press, the more solid it is. And so by varying the pressure of the brush, that is how we're going to get the effects we want. Let's undo that. Let's choose a base color for this. Let's choose that kind of mid-golden brown there. I'm going to come to my DC cover things brush right at the bottom. And if I make my brush stroke, you can see this gets very thick, very fast. That is what I want, because I'm going to be using multiple layers. But what I want with this particular layer is, above all else, coverage. I mean, you can see I'm pressing so hard that there's almost none of the background left. That is what I want. Let's try a little bit around the bottom. I'm pressing fairly light now. If I press harder, I'm getting a stronger effect. And I'm looking at all the big areas here. Look, it's a lot of fun doing pointillism, and you can build up your areas of colour and tones very, very quickly and very easily. But a lot of it is to do with how you control the tones. You can see with this, I'm going way over the edges of my pear. That's fine, because I'm going to do something about this later. But right now, just coverage, and if I can see any of the background, then I'm going to get a little bit grumpy about it. Anyway, let's choose darker colour, because it's definitely darker down the bottom, but I'm getting also a nice golden brown effect. I can live with that. What am I saying? I can live with that. I want that. And right down the bottom, I've got this very dark brown area here. I think that's important. You want the similar tones that are in the actual pear. I'll come up a little bit. Actually, no, I'll choose a slightly lighter colour, because I can see there's an area just down the side of the pear here, which is lighter. And I'm getting a general idea of the form on my pear right now. Let's choose a slightly darker colour here. And I think that's kind of the coverage I was looking for. You can definitely see the dots. That is what I want. I want to play a few games with this, because I think I'm seeing some warmer colours towards the top on the left of this pear. So let's choose some warmer colours and add those there. Remember, we want all these different colours to mix with each other. And I'm going to give you a golden rule for this, if there is such a thing as a golden rule. Just keep going with what you're doing. Lay more dots on top of the dots underneath. Sometimes the dots you put down might look a little bit odd. I don't care. Draw on top of the dots that look a bit odd, because this is all about building up lots of different colours. I'll make that a little bit darker. Yeah, good case in point. What I'm doing now, that green looks a little bit greener than I was expecting, and maybe I like, but I'll keep on going because I can always put dots on top of this. Let's add a little bit more darker around the neck. And I've been dealing in large areas up until now, but I want something now a little bit more controlled. Let's try DC Dense Scatter. That puts down a dense layer of dots. Let's just show you that. But the actual brush head is a little bit smaller. It doesn't spread out as much. So for that, let's try. Towards the top on the left, let me double check. The opacity is on 100 and my dot size is on 20. Yeah, I'll keep that for now. And I'll start to add a little bit more definition down this side. And maybe just a little bit around here. In fact, that can go a bit darker, can't it? Let's try that halfway house colour, halfway in between that colour and that colour, because thankfully somebody had the bright idea of blurring our palettes. Who could that have been, I wonder? And let's try some darker greens down here as well. In fact, let's go for some really quite dark greens indeed. There. I want this to look like a pear. I don't want it to look exactly like the pear I'm drawing, because this whole technique does benefit from a fairly loose interpretation. I don't want to start concentrating on tiny areas of colour. Like, look, all these tiny little dark brown areas, which are very interesting, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to bother with them. It would take someone who's better at me at pointillism to put those bits in and get an overall impression of the pear. Let's just build up the lighter areas here, especially now that I'm using a more controllable pen. Sorry, more controllable brush. Let's choose something from my darker colours and pull this in a little bit more. Oh, one thing I am going to do, let's choose this colour. I'm going to come to this stem. I'm going to choose, let's try Pointy Line 1 Grad. Check my brush size, make it the right size, make the opacity on 100%. And I'm going to put this in. Wow, that is dark. And I want a dense area of dots here. Let's take a look at what I'm doing. I'm kind of drawing a bit blind here. I'll do that, but I'll also come and choose some more browny colours, take that down there. Let's let that join the actual pear rather than deep area of very dark pixels and then a sudden light golden brown of the pear. That's going to look a little bit odd. But again, with this layer, I'm going for coverage. Let's choose a few different colours here. There were some greens I can see, especially around the base where the stem joins the actual pear. And there are some quite light tones in there, but that's going to be risky. I'll put in just a little bit, just to add a little bit of flavour in there. And I think that's my first layer sorted out. What I will do now is come to that layer. I will tap on the end and I'm going to reduce the opacity so that I can see my sketch layer. Then I'm going to come to my eraser and I'm going to come down to my Dotty pressure brush set. I'm going to use DC Pointy Line 1 Graduated, same dot size as that, 20% size for my eraser and definitely opacity on full. Then I do the ever so slightly tedious bit and I start to erase the outline. Now, I could have done this using, I wonder if it's in my recents, using DC Hard Blocker Inner, because that is my no-nonsense make a mark or rubber mark out. But I don't want to do that because if I come here and I up the opacity again, and I'll make the sketch invisible for just a second, this eraser is giving me the same dotty border around the pear as the actual dots inside the pear. That matters to me. I'm not getting this mismatch of lots of little dots forming a shape with a sudden hard line cutting through them. So sketch back on. Can I see it? Just about. I will just lower the opacity of my layer just a bit and go around, and I probably will fade out and fade back in again once I've done this. Okay, I've gone around. Now that I've pulled all the bits away and given my pear a dotty border, this is the point where I turn around and choose my hard blocker inner brush to erase. This will do the job very quickly, but just check you've got the opacity obviously on 100%, but the brush size, try and get the right size for what you're doing, because this does tend to blob out rather quickly. Let me show you this. Thin line, really thick line, thin line. That's so that I can work fast. So just be careful with the amount of pressure you're putting on there. And also, whenever you're erasing or doing stuff like this, the more time you spend scribbling your brush strokes like this, and then suddenly, oh, you make a mistake. Oh, look at that. Then two-finger tap, the more you've got to do the same thing again. So if you can listen to my pen on the surface of my iPad, you can hear me making a series of short strokes like this, rather than one long continuous stroke. That means that if I ever make a mistake, which let's face it, everybody does, it means less work to do all over again. And yeah, I know this is the tedious bit, but an essential part of any digital art program is knowing how to control things. It's not like traditional art. You need to know these kind of techniques, for the simple reason that I've got loads of different brush strokes I can do, but they all come out of a tiny little, it looks like a ballpoint pen, let's face it. It's not like a paintbrush. You can't see the fibers of the paintbrush on your paper or your canvas. You can't control it that way. And this is a good case in point. Look, let's take the opacity back up. And I think, let's try turning the sketch off as well. So I've got a good idea of how things are coming along. And these brushes we're using at the moment, they put down large areas of dots, which is great. It's a lovely way to work, and you can build up some very interesting effects. And you can work fast, but the price of that is that you've got a very general control when you're putting your brush strokes down, but you need the finer control that you get when you can erase things back. And also, let's create another layer. And tap on the icon, and I'm going to come to clipping mask. So now, let's choose a very dark color. Let's choose very dense scatter. If I draw across and back and across and back, you can only see those brush strokes where there are brush strokes on the layer underneath. Let's just show you that. If I unclip the layer, there are my brush strokes. If I tap on clipping mask again, everything's hidden. And this is the reason that I wanted you to make sure you put down a really dense layer of dots. Because if you had a layer with very few dots, that will leave a whole load of empty gaps in that layer, and I wouldn't be able to draw on top of this layer like I'm doing now. Anyway, let's swipe 3 fingers down, and oops, the quick menu always goes to where you last put a brush stroke. Look, if I do a little stroke there, 3 fingers, swipe down again, the quick menu appears just over where I finished my last brush stroke, and I will come to clear layer. All right, so now I've got my basic shape in place, but I want to get things looking a little bit more interesting. The way I'm going to do that is, let's come to medium scatter. Let's just give that a try. From here on in, I have no idea how this is going to turn out. I'm just going to experiment and play around. One of the things I want to do, that's medium scatter grad. I was using 20%. I am now going to start using 45% size brushes. I will also lower the opacity down to about halfway. And what shall I do first? Let's try maybe building up some of those darker areas underneath. Let's try mixing up halfway house on the green side. I'm going to start putting down brush strokes there. Now, can you see this? Well, yes, you can see this because you're watching the video. I'm pressing a little bit lighter, I'm pressing a bit harder, and I'm using a different size brush. And what I'm going for is a combination of the little dots in the background plus the bigger dots in the foreground, because this is something you do see with some artists who use pointillism. The different size dots just make life a bit more interesting. Look, I'm getting little dots, bigger dots. I'm on 50% pressure and I am varying my brush pressure to get further control about how transparent these things are. But I am liking the fact that the little dots and the big dots are playing together. Also, I'm on another layer, so come on, I'm playing around a little bit here. Because I'm on another layer and I'm confident with my layer underneath, I'm not that bothered about making mistakes. And so I'm getting more confident brushstrokes here. And more confident brushstrokes always look better. I mean, if I keep on going with this and it actually all works out, it's going to look like I actually know what I'm doing with pointillism. I've got someone who's not afraid to really splash the paint around. And I'm starting to get that whole load of dots, which on the one hand seem to be a little bit random, but at the same time, they all seem to work together to make a coherent whole. Let's swap my brush. I'm going to come to dense scatter grad. I'm going to increase the size to, what are we, 45%, lower the opacity to around about halfway. And I'm going to put down some areas around here. I'm going to keep on going, and this is getting way too much. Well, I say way too much, it's getting way too scattered for my liking. Don't get me wrong, I like the lighter tones. What about a little bit down on this side as well? And there's also a little bit here, which is all working quite nicely. But like I say, the problem you've got when you do digital artwork is figuring out the right way to control what you're doing. Now, in the case of this, maybe I should have done those very light bits on another layer. In fact, I probably should have done, but I'm going to come to my eraser. My general tab, I'm going to come to nice build-up. My brush size is set to 100%, although it is pressure sensitive, so I can vary the pressure. My brush size doesn't really matter. I want it about around about the 20% mark. No, maybe a little bit smaller. There. And now what I'm going to do, oh, look at this. I can start to fade or erase certain bits to control what I'm doing a little bit better. Definitely down here, I want the brush size to be small because I can see a bit of a harder edge there. Now, the reason I should have done this on another layer is because as well as controlling and erasing those light highlights, which, great, I'm also starting to erase some of those other bigger dots, which is not necessarily what I wanted. But we'll keep on going. Come back to my brush. What do I have? Dense scatter. Yeah, I'm going to choose something a little bit dark, no, warm dark, because I think I've got some areas around here which are just a little bit, well, the top bit is a little bit too dark for my liking. But the golden rule is don't try and erase, just keep going. Add dots on top of other dots, because that's how you're going to get the pointillism effect. A little bit around the central area, which is looking just a little bit on the dull side. Let's try that. I'll put down the dots soft because I'm not sure how well that's going to go. Actually, no, that is quite nice. Must admit, it's quite nice to have a general idea of what I want to tell you. But because this is so chaotic, I have no idea what this is going to look like. And I promise you, this is the first time I've done this video. I haven't had to redo it about 15 times, which is just as well because I'm lazy. A little bit darker around the bottom with some of these bigger strokes. Sorry, bigger dots. And I think that Pear is coming along quite nicely. But there are a couple of other things I want to show you. Come to our layers panel. I will add another layer. I will tap on it, make it a clipping mask, and I'm going to change the color blend mode of this. I'm going to try a lighter one and a darker one. Now for this, because we are playing games with the colors, I'm going to come to color burn, because the color burn layer makes things darker, but it also affects the intensity of the colors. So I'm going to choose, say, this kind of a color, and let's put some brush strokes down and see what it does. I have no idea. Oh, yes, I like this. Look, if I zoom in on this, if I undo that a couple of times, all of those brush strokes that I made are the same color, but this layer is sitting on top of another layer, and because it is in a different layer blend mode, it is doing what layer blend modes do, and it's playing with the colors underneath. Look, if I do 3-finger to redo and just tap and hold. In fact, look, let's show you this. Let's turn the layer off, turn it on again. And can you see how those little dots which are blinking on and off, they've got slightly different colors to them because they are playing with stuff underneath. I wonder if I choose something a little bit more reddish. In fact, you know what, I'm curious. I'll come to my standard disc. I want to choose definitely more of a red color like this, and it's more saturated. What's that going to do? I like that. The effect is subtle, but it's playing some nice games with the colors on top. Come on, let's go for gold. Let's really choose a very saturated red. See what that does. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I like this. Getting some nice autumny colors. Yes, I know that's looking different to what I have from the picture, but I don't care. I like it. Let's make the color a little bit darker for this side. And let's come here. Let's create another layer. Clipping mask again. This one I'm going to turn into, not color burn, which makes things darker and plays with the color. I'm going to turn this into color dodge, which makes things lighter and plays games with the color. Let's try a fairly medium to light color there. Let's just see what this does. Interesting. I'm going to lower the opacity a little bit and press light, because that effect is a little bit too strong for me. But I want a general area here. It's helping to lighten up in certain areas, which is nice. And what if I just choose some of that completely light area there? I can put some of that down. And one thing I can do as well, because I don't know if I mentioned this before. Yeah, I have, I'm sure. You can take that opacity of the layer and you can drop it down to nothing and fade in or out as much as you want. If you're uncertain, just rock backwards and forwards, and I'm going to go, not enough, a little bit too much, not quite enough, a little bit too much, there. And you make sure you get the porridge with just the right temperature. Now, the whole point of this was to get something that looked recognizably like a pear, but I wanted it loose and pointillistic. Let's use some greens there just to mix things up. And you can see how quickly I can build up the form and put down a whole load of different colors. I haven't used thousands upon thousands of colors, but because I've used layer blend modes and altered the opacity to a certain extent, I'm getting the effect I wanted, which is something that frankly looks a little bit of a mess, but somehow it all seems to work together to get the pear. And now I'm using a low opacity on my color burn layer. My brush size I've set back to 20%, and I'm just scribbling down the side. And what I'm finding is that's starting to help marry all of those points together, so I can get all the different variations, but I'm also able to make things a little bit more cohesive, so even better. Let's try a green on that, slightly darker, to see what that does. And yeah, that is really helping as well. At this point, I'm almost tempted to say, well, why not come in on my layer underneath and use the Color Glazer. In fact, you know what? Just for the sake of showing you this, come down to our very bottom layer. Opacity is set low. My brush size is set to around about 25%. That's going to be quite big. Let's make that a little bit smaller, around 19%. I have green chosen. My opacity is set very, very low. And again, that is helping to bind things together a little bit more, but it's also adding another layer of complexity. I've got different layers all happily playing with each other to form this whole. Oh, come on, let's do it. DC Overlay Glazer, let's choose a darker color. Opacity is set low, brush size 3%. Opacity, let's take that down to 25%. And now you can see the problem there. This is not a clipped layer. This is my original layer. Do not want that. So not a problem. Come here, turn on alpha lock. Maybe make my brush size a little bit bigger because I just want to start nibbling away. Just at the very edge of my pear. Just to give it some idea of an outline. Help it stand out from the background just a little bit. If you were here hoping for a lesson on the pure art of pointillism, I'm sorry, you must be disappointed by now, because this is not pointillism. This is areas of color rather than lots of little dots, but it is working. That's what I want. Just while I'm here, let's come back to my eraser, hard blocker inner, and let's just get rid of one or two of these dots that, now that I've made the area darker, are showing up a bit more. Just incidentally, when I'm doing this, everything we've done is clipped to this layer. So if I brush, everything gets taken out. Let's undo that. All right, I'm very nearly there. I think with this, I'm just going to create one more layer. I'm going to drag it underneath. Come on. There we go. And for this, my brush, let's come back. I'm going to choose DC Very Dense. And let's just choose a darker color. Let's try this kind of greenish color. My brush size is set to 20. Let's set that to 45%, the larger brush size, but again, opacity set pretty low. And I'm just going to do this underneath. Just want to put that shadow in place. There we go. I'll make it softer around the outside, keep on going around the inside. Now, actually, this is a good point. Often when I see people doing shadows, they'll do what I'm doing here. And they keep on going and it doesn't quite work. I'm going to take the opacity way up because I want the bit of the shadow that touches the underside of the pear to be very similar in brightness. Otherwise, you get something that looks like a shadow which is somehow stuck on to the bottom of things. It doesn't quite belong. Remember, this bit I'm painting right now is where light goes to die. The elephant's graveyard, but with little dots instead. And now that I've got that similar tone, that shadow does look like it's matching the shadow of the pear. It looks like it belongs in the same painting. Let's just try something. I'm going to alpha lock this so that I can only draw in certain areas. And I'm going to try coming back to blending glaze, color glazer, and I'm going to try some cooler colors there. Let's try a cool color. And let's try that. Build that up a little bit. Yes, I kind of prefer that. I'll take the opacity way up high, but make it a bit smaller so hopefully you can see this. Yeah, that's too much. So let's undo that a few times. So I'll take the opacity down again. I just want a little bit of cool. So I've got all these warm tones on top. I just want a little bit of cooler tone underneath, because the shadows are going to be colder than the lit areas. Always nice to have cool bits in the shadows. Right, let's make it a little bit more cyan-y as well, just to see if that helps anything. Just in one or two areas, maybe just around the outside of the shadow. Yeah, I'll do that. But now I'm going to stop because, well, time's moving on. And frankly, I'm having way too much fun. Right, There we are. Maybe I should have paid a bit more attention to the stem of the pear. Maybe if you're working along, maybe you can do the same thing. But look at this. It's a whole mass of colours, and nearly all of those colours came from these swatches, of which there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 21 different colours, and a lot of those I didn't use. But by varying the pressure of my brush, by sampling colours directly from the drawing, but also by adding these layer blend modes, I'm able to get the effect of thousands and thousands of different coloured dots of different sizes, all thrown down, but somehow all working together to give us a pointillistic pear. And that is some nice alliteration to finish this video. See you in the next one.